Hi, John here again with another Indie Creative Entrepreneur's Journey. And this time we've got Felipe Ferri, who's going to talk about his crowdsourcing an app that really was something that no one really expected to have and stuff. But before we dive into the story of him and how he started developing that and how, in fact, we met and stuff like that, Felipe, maybe you could talk a little bit about what is that kind of gets you excited? What really lights you up?
Well, you mean in entrepreneurship? Well, the thing is, I ever since I left college, I wanted to do some kind of entrepreneurship, but I never had the courage. So when I started working at there's a Brazilian company called Embraer, makes aircraft. I started working there, and I realized that something I really enjoyed in my work was the possibility of going to talk with clients, let's say. So I really enjoyed. We worked developing a software there, and I enjoyed talking to the clients to see what they found about the software and try to get the requisites and the requirements. So that was something that they really they really found very amusing and entertaining, and something that really made me feel great about my work. So, well. I think that's it. I really enjoy being able to create something and to receive a positive feedback about something that I created, as opposed to, for example, just doing something that someone asked me to do. So this is why I chose now to try to work in that way with my apps.
Okay, so I got to ask you, you talk about working with this, company and stuff. And the way we met was through Quora, where you talked about working as a background actor on the show Game of Thrones. What's the connection? How did you go from working, there in Brazil and stuff to being on Game of Thrones?
Oh, okay, so the fact is, as I told you, I was really, I always wanted to do something with my life that wasn't just doing stuff for other people. So at some point, I was in that company. I was completing my project, was about to end. I was about to become if it's 30 years old. I had some money in the bank. I didn't have great responsibilities. As I wasn't married. I didn't bought a house. So I thought that I had really few. I was really free to take any decision that I want. So I decided. So I'm still young. I have money. I have time before me. I have 30 years ahead of me for retirement. So I decided to just quit my job, and I started by making let's say a sabbatical. So I wanted to make like a long trip around the world. So I planned my trip, and one of the places that I wanted to visit was Dubrovnik in Croatia, because my grandmother was from there.
Oh,
so, yeah. So she immigrated to Brazil, but she was from there, and we knew it was a very beautiful city. I don't know if you know Dubrovnik, if you heard of it.
Well, just from watching the show, and also from what I've seen before the show, even I had friends who have been from that part of the world and just heard amazing things about it. And then to actually see parts of it from the show and stuff, it's clear that it's just an amazing city, just from kind of this mix of the old and new.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a really beautiful city. I wanted to visit because of this family relationship. And actually, I realized my mother, that was a great fan of Game of Thrones, she told me that they filmed in Croatia, in Dubrovnik. I didn't know that. Okay. And when I did some research, I found out that they were going to film in the same time frame that I was going to be traveling around. So I tried to, as I had all the flexibility, because at this point I wasn't working anymore, so I managed to schedule all my travel in order to be there at the time of shooting. So it was really easy to become an extra. I just found out the company that made that helped the Game of Thrones production with the local extras. I just sent them an email asking them if I could be an extra, and they asked me for a photo to see what kind of role they could put me in. So, and then they accepted. Like in the next day, I just sent an email. The next day, they said, "Okay, can you be here at this time this week?" So I said, "Yes, okay." So then I scheduled my trip. I went there, and it was really an amazing experience. It was really incredible.
I mean, that's the thing that like it's funny how different times, and I encountered that as well, working as background, like here in Los Angeles and stuff, was that it was just really following this curiosity and just looking into it. I mean, different times people dream about being on shows and movies stuff like that, but they rarely like take action. And yes, I'm with you that like it was just like one step after another and stuff. So after you got on the show, I mean, can you talk a little bit about like what was it like to be on set? I don't want to make this whole talk about that, but I'm just kind of curious, like kind of what were some of your impressions about being in the show? What was it that like that was like what you expected, and what was a surprise?
Well, first of all, it was really amazing because you get transported to a really different time period. It was really amazing. When I got there, at first it's kind of difficult to get used to it because you arrive at a place when you see people dressed as characters from a medieval scene. So at some point, for example, you go there and then you see soldiers, king's guards playing with their iPhones or smoking cigarettes. I
Right.
think the funniest scene is when you see those noble ladies coming out from those chemical bathrooms that they had there. So it was really funny. Or if you see like old noblemen drinking juice for tiny boxes, so it was really funny. Something that I was really impressed with is the fact that the production is really superb. What they do, the sets are really well done. All the costumes are perfect. The armor, they made real armor. It's not like a plastic gold coated armor. It's really metal armor. And then when you are there like 10, 12 hours a day, because that the extra the extra work period is really big. So the thing is, when you get there, you start to get used to it. So it you begin to feel that you are in a medieval world. And actually, something fun is the fact that you kind of begin to see people for the costumes they're using. I don't know if it makes sense. For example, you see some guy using a soldier's armor, and then you begin to think that he's some kind of police, so you can't do anything wrong around him because he's a guard. Or then you see an old noble lady, then you begin to treat her as a noble lady. And actually, the fact that I was a servant in King Joffrey's feast, so I kind of began to. It's kind of funny. But you kind of began to role play, and the role playing begins to be more real. So I saw that you were a cop in one of your.
Oh yeah, I've done detectives, and it's funny you say that about like people start, kind of falling into the roles. I recently just watched the movie about the Stanford prison experiment. If you haven't heard anything about that, it was basically where years ago there was just basically they did an experiment.
A German movie.
Oh no, it was actually here. And it was Stanford, so it was here in the U.S. and stuff.
Okay.
So they might have done like a German version or something like that, but it was basically just a group of students at Stanford University, and they wanted to simulate it. And so the movie just shows like kind of like almost documentary style how like as time went on, the prisoners started acting more like prisoners. The guards started acting more like guards, where they were like abusing each other and like kind of just like they started off like kind of just joking with each other and stuff like that. But then the more the things went on, like kind of and then they had to stop it within 7 days. They actually planned to go for like 14 days, but they had to stop it because it started getting violent and like out of control and stuff. And that's just the funny thing though, that like people do fall into their roles. I mean, whether it's just like what they wear to like kind of how people perceive each other's roles and stuff. It's really amazing.
Yeah, I remember that I saw a video, I think it was by BBC, that they wanted to show how people really, they kind of respect a uniform without knowing if the person really is what this uniform makes it come to be. So there was a very fun experiment. They had one guy, he was dressed all in black, and he had like a cap, like a police cap, but he didn't have any badge at all.
Right.
He was just walking around at the square and giving people like strange orders, and everybody was. There was strangers like this. For example, there was a girl that was holding a bag with her right hand, and then the guy came and said, "Oh, please, ma'am, please hold this bag with the other hand." or please don't step in these lines. So and people just obeyed him because they saw the uniform and thought it was it was a figure of authority. So well.
Yeah, there's something about like we do tend to like fall in line, you know, like kind of it's just something about like, you know, the thing of like roles and so that's a whole thing we could probably have a whole discussion on.
Yeah.
And I would love to talk to you more about the show and stuff like that. But I think what we should probably do for the audience stuff is talk a little bit about, so then what led to like, you know, starting to work on developing apps and stuff. Like what was that transition from like kind of, you know, being on the show to like, you know, kind of starting to work on different apps? Because I know you also talked about possibly doing a game app and stuff. So how did this evolve in terms of, you know, this part of what you're doing now?
Well, the thing is, I really had most of my professional life, I worked with software. So I had some experience with software. But when I left Embraer, I didn't know with what I wanted to work. So I decided to take I was going to take a sabbatical year to find out things. So I wanted to test different things, as I know that you also enjoy testing lots of different possible projects. So the thing is, at some point, I tried to develop some prototypes. I tried to do other kind of jobs, and at some point, I decided to start learning app development to see what I thought about it. So I started doing it, and I really enjoyed it. And I thought, well, maybe I can try to make some money with this. So, but at the beginning, I was just I was not pressuring myself into find something that was going to make me earn money quick, because I had my savings. So I decided, well, I'm going to try to find something that I enjoy and something I think I'm going to be good at. So I started learning how to program for iOS specifically. But at some point, I started to train a different way of developing apps. It was inspired largely by that book, The Lean Startup, probably you know, by Eric Rice, and also by a video that I watched that Apple released in the Worldwide Developers Conference, I think in 2014. It was called "Fake it till you make it." It's a very common expression, but the thing is, they have shown a process that the designers use at Apple for making apps. Then you have people that don't know how to program, but they want to begin to validate their apps ideas. So they begin by drawing fake apps using Keynote or PowerPoint, and then they put this animated slides on a phone. They begin showing people, and then people think they can't really differentiate and know that that's not an app. They think it's an app. They begin to give feedback, and you go back and then you start improving your app. So I've seen that process. I thought it was really cool, and I started to try to make it by myself. So at some point, I started to, instead of just sitting and coding, because I think that's like a vice. I don't know if it's appropriate to use this word, but it's like we program as people who you also program, right?
I've done a little bit, but you know, the thing is that like what I've seen over and over again, and I'll be honest, I'm guilty of different times that like I have developed, like I've written books, I've developed training courses, like a lot of different products. And the thing is, like, entrepreneurs sometimes get caught up in that idea that like, oh, this is something that like everyone's going to want to buy, you know, because it's great and all that kind of stuff. And you know, whether we call it a vice or otherwise, it's the biggest mistake that like your typical entrepreneur makes, that they fall in love with this idea that they've, you know, put all this time and money, different times, and invested it, and then they when they push the publish button, or they kind of you know, put it on the store and stuff, then they go and you hear crickets and they wonder, wait a minute, you know, like this is so amazing, how come nobody wants to buy it? And that's the thing that you know, luckily you're discovering that, like, you know, you've got to validate, you've got to put it out there before that and see like what people's response is.
Yeah, and also I think people who know how to code, they have an additional problem. I agree completely with what you just said, but we have another problem. Is this: when you have an idea, you just want to jump into coding. So you just want to sit on the computer and start coding. And the fact is that you can have an idea that's really, it it takes like 10 minutes to just have this idea. But if you sit to code, you're going to take like several weeks to have something to look at and to see, oh, okay, so this was my idea. So to just validate what you had the idea. So what I want to train is like a form of having my ideas and try to transform them into something that you can see quicker. So that's why that process by Apple was so good. It's not like an Apple process, a process that many designers do around the world. That I am basing in a video that I watched from them that was really cool. Is the fact that in like 1 or 2 hours, since you had the idea, you can just draw some slides, Keynote, and then you can have exactly the idea of how your app is going to look. So instead of having to have one idea, choose one idea that you know you're going to have to commit to it and then spend like weeks developing it, you can like 1 hour have something from your idea and then do something about it. So you can, for example, in one day, you can try 3 or 4 or 5 ideas quickly. The thing is, at some point, when you start to do these quick sketches using Keynote and you start taking your ideas and putting to paper, you have something that you can go around and show people. So this is the link where when I started to show people on the street, I first was in that stage of just doing prototypes. And then just by putting on paper, it makes it easier to sit down and code because now you know in what direction you're going. So I started to make like quick prototypes in a week or so. And I had a friend that suggested me, so how about we make an app and you go to the shopping mall and start showing people there? And I never thought of that before. I was just thinking of making quick prototypes and then showing people over the internet, or I don't know. But then he gave me that idea. Then I just thought, well, that's it. That's what I'm going to do. So I started making a prototype and then went to the street and showing people, showing everybody I could find on the street, showing my prototype and getting their feedback. So one of the first apps where I started doing this was an app that was the purpose of the app is to split a bill when you go to a bar or restaurant. Well, when I go out with my friends, it always happens that, for example, there's some people that drink a lot, some people that don't drink, and then at the end, everybody's making calculations to know how much each one paid. So I had this idea for the app. I know it's not original. There are like dozens of apps that do the same thing. But using that process of just taking the idea from your head and putting it into a Keynote slideshow, so I managed to get this idea in like 1 or 2 hours. I had something that I thought it was interesting. So I sat down. I spent a week developing my first prototype, and then I started going to bars and restaurants in my city and just going to the tables and speaking to people, presenting myself. Oh, okay, I would like to show you an app. Okay, can you give me your feedback? So I showed a lot of people. And it was really cool because at some point I got addicted to just talking to random people on the street about my ass. And it was really cool because when I was showing them the app, I was not just getting their feedback. I was also testing because for like I present to around 300 people in this period of development. So I had to use my app like 300 times. So at some point, there are things that when you're doing, you kind of feel embarrassed because when you are demonstrating to people, you see that what you're doing is not easy to do, is not really interesting. So kind of you learn how your app is hard to use because you have to use it a lot.
Right.
Also, I try to give it to other people. So they try to use. So I got a lot of cool feedback as well. And it's really cool because if you spend a lot of time doing this and you are really improve your app, even though people are really polite, every time they are polite, they're never going to say, oh, your app sucks, or they're going to be encouraging. They're going to say, okay, oh, that's really cool. You should pursue this way. But if you're doing this for a long time and you are really improving the software, what happens is you feel that the feedback keeps improving. So even though all feedback is positive, like encouraging, you see that as your app is getting better, the feedback is relatively, comparatively with the first feedback is getting better, because at the beginning people say, oh, that's okay, but at some point they say, wow, the app is really cool, and then it's really it's an amazing experience to just do that, and I kind of got addicted to that.
Awesome. I'm gonna put this on pause so the recording is going again, and we're back. And yeah, before we were the break and stuff, you were talking about how this idea of getting validation and everything. Can you talk a little bit about like what was it like that kind of like I find that most entrepreneurs, what they really have a hard time with is this idea of getting feedback. They really, what they try to do is just stick to programming what they feel like they know and everything like that. So what kind of, you know, how did that happen where you started to kind of really, you know, get this feedback? What encouraged you to kind of start doing that?
Well, the thing is, I really didn't like this process of spending a lot of time without getting feedback. There's something I think something I found out is like if you get constant feedback, you keep motivated to just follow on with your project. Because if you spend a lot of time doing a project and you don't get feedback about it, at least for me, it was really common to get unmotivated and even dropping the project at some point. But when you're doing this and seeking for constant feedback, even if you begin to get unmotivated, then you get a positive feedback, then you get motivated again, then you want to just do it more. And I think it's really this is something that compelled me to just look out for that, because when you're working, I was working mainly alone, so I didn't have other sources of motivation, so I had to look for these sources on the street. And this was really interesting. I think that this is a good thing for people, even if they really don't want the feedback, like if they think that their idea is the best and they don't want to spoil it and whatever, just promoting and showing your idea to people is going to keep you motivated in the project. I think this is a good thing that happened to me, and well, that was really
I do find that's what happens with like creative entrepreneurs, because they tend to be like artists or like, you know, like whether they're filmmakers and musicians and stuff that like different times, I mean, they're kind of afraid to get the criticism stuff. It's because they feel like, you know, their idea or their product is this kind of this baby that they want to protect and everything. I have a friend who like I mentioned during the break that he's working on an app that's, you know, for restaurants for getting, you know, like basically making reservations in advance of stuff, and he's kind of looking to kind of target it for these luxury or the higher end restaurants or everything. But the basic question is, you know, like I mean, does anybody really want this? You know, like does the customers and do the restaurants and everything like that? So what would you say to somebody like that, like who, you know, they've got this app idea, they're kind of really excited about it, they really do feel like, you know, like, you know, yeah, you know, like kind of there's everyone's bound to like it and everything like that. What would you, you know, kind of suggest to them?
Well, what I usually do is the first thing is try to make the easiest and simplest prototype that you can have in order to show people. It doesn't have to be a functioning prototype. You don't have, people tend to think that if you're going to release an app, you have to start thinking about doing an iOS, Android app, and you have to have a backend, you have to have all this infrastructure, and then you have to have a good design. So at the beginning, I think you have to do the easiest part. What I usually do is I make like an offline simulated app that is an executable app. You can just click the buttons and everything, but instead of communicating with the server, it just runs offline. And this is something we can already show people. Another thing is try to design like a very simple pilot. Even if you can do the pilot without having to do any coding at all, it's better. If you allow me, I would like to share another example of another app that I was developing that I really enjoyed, because I had this process of developing like a pilot that didn't have that had really a little coding. Well, okay. So the thing is, here in Brazil, we have a problem when you go, for example, to many public places. You go to the post office or to banks, and you have long queues. I don't know how it is in the United States, but it's really common here that you go to the post office, you want to send. Oh, are you there, John? Hi. I think I might have lost the connection. Are you there? Hello, 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 hello. Recording, so I'm going to resume it again. Okay, okay.
Okay.
So I was telling you, we had this problem with long queues in many public places. So, for example, you want to just deliver a mail in the post office, so you have to do like a 1 hour queue. So this is something I find really annoying. So as I told that I live in a farm, so the post doesn't arrive here. So we have to have a post box. So when I go to the post office and I see that there is a queue, like a 1 hour long queue, what I usually do, I get one of those, how do you call it, the system that you get like a token with a number? How do you call it in English? It's like a piece of
Number.
that it has a number that they're going to call it in a display. How do you call it?
Maybe like a yeah, I know what you're talking about, and I'm trying to think of what the name is for it. It's like basically a not so much a receipt, but like a notice, I guess. Just yeah, like a notification.
Okay, let's say is the queue number. So they had probably it's not very usual there in the United States that so they a form of they trying to organize the queue. So you get like a number, then they are going to call you by your number.
Right,
So
right.
I usually go there. I get one of these numbers. I go out and we're going to do other things around, and then I come back like 40 minutes later and get and send my letter. Okay. So the thing is, I had the idea talking to my father. How about if I made an app that allows you to see the number, your number in the
Oh,
queue?
right. And where
In
you
another
are.
Yeah, so you can just you go there, you get your number, then you go do things around nearby,
Right.
and then you go back when you see that's nearby, near to your time. So okay, so I had this idea, and then I wanted to test it. So I thought, well, usually the programmers are going to see it, are going to develop a system, then they're going to try to talk to the post office, try to integrate their system to the post office system, and so on. So, but what I want to do is like a test, a totally offline open loop test. So I devised the following test. I developed a small app. It's like an app for the iPad. It's like a panel that someone could just sit inside the post office, just watch the number in the queue, in the display, and just say, okay, so now they call the number 15 on desk 3. So just keep sitting there and then selecting the next place on the queue. So this app just fed into a mobile website, really simple one that just show, okay, so the post office here in the center of the city, now they are calling the queue number 13. So in a week, I developed this small app that I could test without having to ask any, well, I didn't have to integrate to the system of the post office. I could just have one person there.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was interesting is that I spent 1 week developing the software, and I spent 3 months finding some place that they would allow me to do a pilot. So I talked to managers at post office, at banks, in a lot of places. And after 3 weeks negotiation, I had some place. It was like how do you call it? Is a customer service agency here that they authorized me to do like a week pilot, and then during this week we made this pilot. The pilot was very good because we had a chance to talk to users and to people who worked at the place and all of things. But I think one of the most valuable lessons of this experience is that if I stopped and programmed the app that I thought I had to do with a complete integration, like a API and a beautiful iOS and Android app, I will have spent like 3 or 4 months developing this app. And at the moment that I was going to try to use this app, nobody was going to allow me. So it's kind of like all this developing time was going to be thrown in the garbage. So I think if you try to simplify to the maximum your prototypes and your pilots and try to do the less coding to test the idea, you start learning really early in the process. So I think this is the main lesson also in that book, The Lean Startup. So for your friends, for example, for your friend in the who's going to make an app for a restaurant, I think the first thing he should do is try to just draw some screens without coding at all, and then just go to a lot of restaurants and talk to managers and talk to waiters and talk to customers and see what they think about these screens. And then if he can try to replace some of the features using other apps, just try it. For example, this idea that I told about the queues, I could even try it without even using coding at all. For example, I could just use WhatsApp. You use WhatsApp. So I could just, for example, sit there and ask people around, if you want to just leave, you can enter my group on WhatsApp, and I'm going to tell you what is the current queue number. You understand? So, for example, if I wanted, I could just have the idea in the same day. I could just go there without asking permission to anybody, because I just sit on the chair and start informing people around the current. That's another lesson. I shouldn't have asked for permission in the places, because once I asked for permission and people said, "Oh, sorry, we can't allow you because our manager has to authorize you." At some point, when I asked for permission, I couldn't do it without having their permission. So I think the other lesson is to just do your experiments without asking anybody. And if anybody complains, then you ask for forgiveness, you say sorry, and then just go.
That was one of the things I had to admit that, like, I would say in was it's better to ask for forgiveness than to
exactly
beg for permissions.
Exactly. Yeah, because I think the managers also, for example, if you talk to a manager that doesn't have a decision power, so if you ask him and he doesn't have the decision power, even though he enjoyed your project and wants to help you, if he authorizes you without talking to his manager, he's going to get screwed afterwards. But if you do it without asking for his permission, he even can have like a blind eye to what you're doing, and then afterwards, if someone complains to him, say, "Oh, sorry, I didn't know." So actually, I think it's better even for the manager if you just do it without compromising him.
I want to also talk about, like, this other friend who she's right now crowdfunding for an app. So she's looking to raise, like, thousands of dollars to develop this app and everything. And I think it's a great idea what she's got and stuff like that. But I feel like, she hasn't really validated with an audience and stuff. And I feel like that, like, she may, succeed in the fundraising. And I guess fundraising to some degree, like, as you raise the money, you're basically building an audience for your app and everything. So I guess she has that going for her. But what are your thoughts around, like, kind of, like, just basically, developing something that, like, you're not sure about, like, the audience and about, like, kind of, what will happen, like, kind of once you've actually built it and stuff?
Well, I think, for example, if you crowd fund something and you really manage to get the money, you kind of can just build whatever you promise you're going to build, even if afterwards people really don't use it because you got the money. But every entrepreneur wants to do a product that people wants at some point, and I think that the least she could do is to talk to people that are not. She can't talk to friends and family. She has to talk to people that are her target audience, that are going to try to be objective about the feedback, and at least do draw some screens of her app, even if it's just simulating the app, like just static screens, but with kind of the designs and the features. Because when you say an idea, it's really easy to say an idea, but it's really difficult to transform this idea in something that is really going to be useful in an app. And when you say the idea, the other person hears it, and she imagines a very beautiful app in her head. So actually, her feedback is also not going to be objective, because it's not going when you're going to do the app, you probably are not going to do the same thing that she was thinking. So I think that at least drawing some screens is really easy to do, and it's really helps you to gather feedback. So I think that's something that she could do. But probably she's doing a crowdfunding, you said. So probably she had to, I don't know if she had to do some screens for the video, the crowdfunding video, but usually I think it's a good idea to have a demo video of an app doing only with screens drawn in PowerPoint or Keynote.
So with the different things that you've learned in the process so far and stuff like that, what do you feel like are the the biggest lessons you've taken away from your experiences with, like, talking to these different people in the streets and the shopping malls and stuff?
Okay, there's several assumptions that people make, that when I started to show people on the street my apps, I saw that this assumption not every time will hold true. For example, the first thing, when you have an idea, then you tell your friend this marvelous idea, and the first thing he does is, okay, that already exists, so there is already an app that does that, or a website, and then you just become sad because, okay, oh, your idea wasn't original. Okay, so what I found out, for example, I had this idea of making an app for splitting bills. Okay, so when I go to the internet, go to the Apple App Store or Google Play, you had dozens of apps that do exactly the same thing. When I started showing people, I showed it to, I told you, around 300 people, nobody used or knew any app for splitting bills. So they thought, wow, I've never seen something like this before. So the thing is, the first lesson, it doesn't matter if you have identical products. It doesn't matter if people don't know the other products. So the thing is, you have to make your product arrive to people that don't know the other products. So this is something. So now when I have an idea and I see that it already exists, I don't feel sad anymore, because I know, well, the only thing I have to do is to make let's say to market place my app better than him. And if you think that you have like millions of apps, and people usually don't remember more than 10 or 20 apps from the top of their mind, so you have really a lot of space to try to conquering these people for your app. So okay, so that's the first lesson. The first lesson is, it doesn't matter if your idea is not unique. So there's another lesson as well, is the thing about you don't want to tell your idea to other people. You want to keep it to yourself. This is related to the first lesson, because as every idea, as original and unique ideas, they really don't exist, because you have billions of people thinking all ideas at the same time in the whole world. The chances that you had a unique idea is really, really slim. So if you keep to yourself, because you don't want people to steal it, it doesn't matter, because somebody is going to have the same idea. So what you have to do is to just tell everybody, and then get a lot of feedback, and be the person who managed to use this idea to make a better app. Also, if you keep the idea to yourself, let's say that you manage to keep to yourself, and then you spend a year developing, and then you release that idea. If your idea is really good, there are going to be people that as soon as they see your idea, they're going to have the ability to, in a week, have a very good app, identical app, and they're going to have the ability to market it better than you had, and everything, because you don't have the experience. So the thing is, you are doomed anyway. So so I think if you so the best thing is to try to acquire experience really fast, even if you have to sacrifice your idea, because when you don't have experience, you're not going to be able to compete with people who have experience. So that's another thing that I learned. And there's another thing. Okay, so now from the top of my head, I don't remember. So okay.
Was it related to experience, or was it more related to just different times, the ideas themselves, or?
Okay. Now I think those were the most important of them, because it is something that people always think about, the keeping the idea a secret.
Right.
and the fact that your idea already exists. So I think probably I'm going to remember the other later. But I think oh, okay, please.
So that's almost a little bit contradictory, and I think that's what's interesting sometimes is sometimes as entrepreneurs sometimes you run into these situations because on the one hand you're talking about get feedback and stuff, but the other you're saying like to keep it a secret. So it's like they seem like it's kind of contradictory, and I think that there's so many things like that in business and in life that like you have to be able to kind of find the tension between these contradictory things, and that's the success is like but it's not as though one or the other is true. You have to like kind of it's like kind of almost balancing the two. That's what it seems like to me.
Yeah, well, I think, for example, if you are like a very big company that you know that if you're going to make something, you are going to have other big companies copying you, like what happened with Apple. Okay, so I think you should really be afraid. But if you are starting out and you have an idea and you really, because our ability to just make everybody, I think it's difficult to make. I've seen that in the Lean Startup book. They were telling this. It's difficult for you to convince someone to copy your idea. It's not like because you think that your idea is brilliant, but everybody has a lot of brilliant ideas and things that they want to do. And in order to your idea be copy worthy for someone who has the money, has the ability to copy it, your idea has to be really, really incredible and validated and really thought out and everything. And the chances that you have this at the beginning of your project is really small. And especially because people tend to have ideas for apps that fall in areas that they don't have any expertise at all. For example, I don't have any expertise at all in restaurants and bars. The only expertise I had is to paying bills. But so I wanted to make an app to organize for people who go there. So it's kind of like a little arrogant to think that you, without any kind of experience, are going to have an idea that nobody thought before. And if someone sees it, it's going to copy it and going to make a lot of money, and they're going to leave you in the. So
yeah, I think that's one of the things that I took. Like that's a lesson I took from your experiences is that like what entrepreneurs different times they do is they think like, oh, I've eaten all my life at restaurants, so I know kind of like what's a valuable app because I've eaten at all these restaurants, so therefore I know restaurants. But like you said, what they don't have is the experience of talking to these different restaurant owners, talking to the different other customers in the restaurants. Maybe they've talked to friends and hung out at different restaurants, but they've never like just talked to just different strangers and like kind of gotten their feedback. And so that experience in itself is probably one of the most valuable things that you got, like kind of that like no one else is going to duplicate, like kind of. So that's something that like to me that like whether like it's the things that you learn from doing this app and stuff, or that like you and I have talked about like kind of helping other apps that are looking to get into restaurants and everything like that, then you're a consultant then that like nobody else can copy because you have just even right now you have 300 conversations under your belt. That's something that like very few people can say that.
Yeah, exactly. That's what you said. I remember one of the other lessons of the positive things of doing this is like the serendipity. Did I pronounce it right?
Serendipity, but same difference.
Yeah. I think that's the best part of showing your app to people, because when you do that, you make like context that you wouldn't even imagine. For example, it happened to me a lot. My city is not really small. It's like it has like 700,000 people, citizens in the city. But it happened like I met some person showing my app, and then I met some person in a totally different occasion, and then I made a connection because this person already heard about me because I shown the app to the other person who was a friend. And then I make contacts like for people from the entrepreneurship community, startups communities here in my city. So people, they kind of knew my story before I knew them, and then they invited me to participate in events. So even if you don't get feedback from your app, or even if you find out that your app is not a really good idea, you get a really nice, really good contacts, opportunities, and you find out new ideas. I think what's most likely to happen when you have a an idea and start getting feedback is to pivot, to find out that your original idea wasn't good, and then you find other ideas, find other problems that the bar or the restaurant owners they have that that you could solve and will be really better. So yes, it was said, just by talking to people, you can arrive these conclusions. Yes.
Awesome, Felipe. This has been great to spend the time with you, and yeah, definitely. I'm gonna after we stop the recording, stuff like that. I want to kind of check back in with you a little bit. But what's the best way for people to kind of stay in touch with like what's going on with the app and also with your work and stuff, and to learn more about you?
Well, I have a blog, but unfortunately it's in Portuguese, so people I don't think they are going to be able to. But for example, I think they can follow me. I am trying to publish some articles on Medium, and maybe you can put the link from Quora, so people can just if they want to find out more about the Game of Thrones gig, so they can just read it and then send me a message. But I can also leave my email if people want to contact me later.
Perfect. Thanks again for your time, and I'm going to actually stop the recording.
Okay.